It's the time of the year again where I have the privilege to talk to Ed Hooks, a wonderful acting teacher. He taught a class at the Film Academy that changed my life, my way of thinking about animation. And it's great to sit down with you almost every year.
I love this.
It's so wonderful. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. I wanted to ask you if you could maybe give us an advice of how to approach acting in animation. If I, as an animator, I'm given audio of dialogue, or I want to improve my own acting skills, so I get some dialogue to animate. Now, what would you say is the best way to start?
The best way to start is to ask yourself what the character is doing. Aristotle said in the Poetics, every human action has a purpose. Really, all of acting theory is based upon that principle. Nobody has ever improved it. They've only found other ways to say it. Okay. But really, that's all acting is. So when you receive an audio recording and you're going now to animate this character that's doing this, you need to be justifying everything. Why does the character do this? What is the character doing? A real important lesson is that, you see, in the history of animation, animators have been taught to make characters appealing, to have good personality, to express emotion. But that's not acting. Okay, that's a character model. It can be very attractive, but it's not acting. Walt Disney gave Mickey Mouse a brain, and you had an illusion of life. But an illusion of life is also not acting. It's where acting begins. Mm-hmm. Acting is doing. And it doesn't have to be a lot of physical activity, but acting always involves some physical activity. But the magic formula for acting is you say to your character, what are you doing? And the character should be able to answer in theatrical terms, this is my objective, this is what I'm trying to achieve, this is the action that I'm playing to achieve that objective, and this is the obstacle or conflict that I'm overcoming to reach that objective. If they can't answer that, then you know you've got a problem of some kind that you can deal with here. Yeah. Action in pursuit of an objective while overcoming an obstacle. Mm-hmm. That formula will change your life. Yeah. If you apply it. Yeah. So I'll give you an example. I was at an animation event in England, and I, when you have dinners and they put you with other speakers, and I was with a speaker for dinner who introduced himself to me as being the head of animation for Disney's Big Hero 6. Mm-hmm. And he was a very nice man, and he introduced himself that way. Now, he did not know that I had recently written an article that was fairly critical of Big Hero 6 for various reasons. But but I did not want to ruin his dinner either. And so I said, oh, Big Hero 6. I said, you know what my favorite sequence is in that movie? He said, no, what? And I said, it was when Baymax gets drunk.
Yeah, and that's a really fun one.
You remember this sequence?
Oh, yes.
And he begins to deflate. Okay.
On the stairs.
Yeah. And they have to get him, he and Hero, the character Hero, they have to get him back home to plug him in. Yeah. And I said, I thought that sequence was really excellent, top to bottom, really good stuff, very good acting. And he said, oh, well, thank you very much. And then he offered, he said, well, you know, it wasn't always like that. And I said, no. And he said, no. He said, originally we had Baymax in a shopping cart. And he said, and then one day somebody suggested, he said maybe it was a storyboard person, suggested that we take Baymax out of the shopping cart. And he said, and it just worked so much better.
Uh-huh.
And I said, right, it would, yeah. I said, well, you know why? And he said it was funnier. And I said, right, it was funnier. And he said, well, we all agreed. It just worked a whole lot better with him out of the shopping cart. And I said, right. I said, do you know why? And it was clear to me that he really did not know why. He knew it worked, and he was a top-line animator. You know, you're talking Disney, for God's sakes. And but he did not understand action in pursuit of an objective while overcoming an obstacle. The answer to the question, what's wrong with Baymax in the shopping cart? Do you know? Do you know the answer?
He's not doing anything.
That's correct.
Yeah.
He's not doing anything. So if you freeze frame Baymax in the shopping cart, you say, what are you doing? All he can say is, I'm waiting for Hero to take me back home and plug me in.
Yeah.
So Baymax in the shopping cart cannot act.
Yeah.
And so this is an answer to your question about what is acting. How does it work? Well, the character has to be doing something. And I don't know how much Disney spent animating Baymax in the shopping cart, but it probably was in the hundreds of thousands of euros, you know, that they spent. And if they had just simply applied basic acting theory, they never would have put him in a shopping cart in the first place.
Yeah.
Because you know that the answer to the question is that he's not doing anything.
What's very interesting for me about this is that, you know, the amount of money is not important in this case. He could have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a film where he's in a shopping cart, and it would probably cost the same amount of money to do the wonderful sequence that we then saw. It seems like, you know, the tools for making a good acting scene in the first place and for troubleshooting a scene that doesn't work, you can use this model both times.
Yes, it's actually what you would call technique.
Yeah.
Okay, technique is what you use when you don't know what else to do. Okay, most of the time, it's going to be very obvious what the character is doing. Yeah. You know, the character is trying to swim across the pool and he can't swim. The character is trying to cook a hamburger and doesn't know how to cook. The stove doesn't work. Most of the time, it's going to be clear. But it's those times when you do something and you animate something and you know something is wrong. It's not working like you think maybe it should. That's when technique. You say, okay, wait a minute. Freeze frame the character. What are you doing? The character needs to have an answer. If the character says, well, I'm sad, then you say, okay, you're sad, so what are you doing? And the character says, well, I'm just so sad. I know you're sad, so what are you doing? It's a terrible day. And what are you doing? You keep after it because the character needs to be doing something. Emotion tends to lead to action. Acting is doing. It's not acting is feeling. Although we operate in an arena of emotion, emotion itself is not actable.
But it drives us to action.
It drives us to act. So the character says, I'm sad. So what are you going to do about that? What do you do? What are you doing? And so the character cannot just keep repeating that they're how they feel.
Yeah.
So that's what technique is, and that's how you use acting theory. You use it for when you don't know what else to do, and most of the time you will know what to do. It'll be okay. And then you'll be able to take a scene a sequence that maybe the sequence doesn't work. Maybe you've received this dialogue, it's in the recording, and maybe it just doesn't work. It's not a good scene. You still know action, objective, obstacle. So maybe you know, for example, that there's only 3 kinds of obstacle. There's only 3. There's conflict. There's conflict with yourself, conflict with a situation, and conflict with another character. There are no more choices. There's only 3.
Yeah.
So you say, okay, how can I get one of these 3 in here? It'll give the scene some tension, something to it, so that the character is doing something. That's how you apply technique.
Interesting. I was actually spontaneously thinking about, if I would ever have the problem that, I don't really know what the character has as an obstacle, I could just put something in his environment, or I could, give him something to deal with that is annoying him, maybe. And then you would have a theatrically valid situation.
Sure.
That's interesting.
I have a theory about Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro has a very troubled expression. Have you ever noticed this? He looks worried. He looks angry. He gets out of bed in the middle of the night and he goes to get a glass of milk, and he looks that way. This is the way he looks all the time, 24/7. And so no matter what he's doing, he appears to have conflict. Okay. He has conflict with himself.
Yeah.
He looks like all the time like he is not happy with what he's doing. And so I think it's, from an actor's perspective, I think, he has an advantage because I don't have that. I have to, for me, I'm happy to do what I'm doing. So for me, I have to find the conflict. But yeah, you become, if you know that it needs conflict obstacle, you do. One of the best ways to do it, if it's not in the script, is to give the character something that's something else that's on their mind, for example. And I've got to get this done because I've got to get to this other thing I'm doing. Yeah. And so that's enough. That becomes conflict. I don't have enough time to do what is required. And the audience doesn't know. I tell my students that really we in the class are all like a bunch of magicians. And what we're talking about is where the rabbit is hidden. Mm-hmm. And once you know where the rabbit is hidden, then a magic act never looks the same again, Yeah. However, you develop a different kind of appreciation for a magic act. Mm-hmm. The audience doesn't want to know where the rabbit is hidden because it ruins magic for them. Yeah. But we need to know. Mm-hmm. And so this kind of thing about finding a way to put conflict when it's not in the script, okay, that's a rabbit. Yeah. Audience will never know what you did. Yeah. The moment will go by quite quickly. They will enjoy the moment. They'll think something is up with this character, and they will not know what you just did. They won't know you just pulled a rabbit out.
Yeah. Which reminds me of a moment in your class where it was, I think, a king and a servant meet each other, and you let the students play that first without anything in their head. They're just doing that. And then you tell them to put a goal in their head and to really think something while they're doing it. And it changes everything. You suddenly have real characters. It's very impressive. One thing that is maybe also interesting is how there's like goals for a character on a global level and on this very micro, macro level, like I want to go there, I want to drink a glass of water, I want to do this or that.
Sure.
How does that fit together, this big story goal and these little goals?
Well, an objective in acting should be provable.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I want to go to Berlin. You'll know whether or not you got there. So that's an objective that would work as an acting objective. But you would not want to have as an objective, I want to be happy, because you're never going to come to a point where you say, I'm as happy as I'm ever going to be. Mm-hmm. So an objective acting, when you say to a character, what are you doing? When they say, this is my objective, it needs to be provable. Mm-hmm. Now, what you're describing, long-term, bigger objectives, in acting, okay, I'm shifting now from animation over to stage acting for a second, because this is a subject that I don't usually include much in acting for animators. There's something called a super objective. Mm-hmm. And a super objective, often the character does not know what his super objective is. Okay. A super objective is the reason why you chose the career field that you have, and why you're not a doctor, or why you're not a car mechanic. Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. What you're doing scratches your itch, if you will. But if you look back at your life choices, there's been something that's been guiding you, okay? And if you think about, because when you're born, you're a baby, you get old enough, you can do anything you want. Your life can be anywhere you want. If you think of your life as your creation, unless you just think every day is random, you construct a life. To a large degree, you choose what you do. You choose whether you want to live in Stuttgart or Paris, and what you want to be doing 5 years from now. All of this is called a super objective. Mm-hmm. And some people, my favorite example of super objective is interesting. It has nothing to do with animation, but I'm going to tell you. But the American president, Bill Clinton, came from a very low background. His childhood, he lived in a trailer. Came from, there was no money. His mother, I think his father left. His mother raised him. It was a hard scrabble kind of childhood. But here he grew up and went to elite colleges and became very educated and became ultimately the president of the United States, mm-hmm. okay, one of the most important and most powerful people in the world. Mm-hmm. And so what does he do? He gets involved with one of his interns, mm-hmm. With Monica Lewinsky. So he has a sexual situation with her in the Oval Office of the White House. Mm-hmm. Now, you say, why would this man do this? He's one of the most powerful people in the world. If he really, really must cheat on his wife, there's much easier ways to do it than this. Mm-hmm. He can find another woman if he wants to find. I mean, there's a lot of options for him. But it was his super objective. Bill Clinton needs admiration of a certain kind. Mm-hmm. And becoming the most powerful person in the world as a president did not scratch his itch. What scratched his itch was an intern looking adoringly into his eyes, because he needed that kind of feedback in order to feel complete. Yeah. That is the mystery of super objective. And if you asked Bill Clinton, Why did you do this? In fact, his answer was, because I could. He doesn't know. If you were to ask him about super objectives, he would not know. But if I was playing him, I would understand. I would have to justify why I did this. It's not enough that you just want to have an experience with this young woman. Why risk everything? Why risk the office of the presidency to do this? You understand?
Yeah.
That's super objective. Everybody in the world has super objective. And most often they're not aware of it. It's what drives us. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
Global.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see why I don't get into this much with animators though. Because you're dealing with a character. It's really hard to find. I don't want to confuse people. If they don't know a character super objective, I don't know that the state of the art in animation has gotten to the point where we can be dealing a lot with super objectives. When we get there, I will start teaching this.
I find it super interesting. I mean, there is some terms that probably a lot of animators know, is this want and need thing, which dips a little bit into this direction, and the character maybe being able to formulate a goal, being able to say like, I want this, but it might not be that what he really wants or needs. Yeah, I guess the people who visit Animator Island regularly know that I'm very much into storytelling, so this is super interesting to me. So yeah, we are here for the advanced stuff now, which I think is very great. Speaking about advanced stuff and more knowledge, you're bringing out a new edition of your book, Acting for Animators. What is different in the newest edition?
Acting doesn't change, but my references do. I refer to different movies. I find new ways to say things, hopefully. One of the things that's in this book is, in 1935, Walt Disney wrote a memo to the man at his studio that was the head of training for his animators. And he wrote a very famous memo about 6 pages long about how to train an animator. Because there was no animator training back then. Everybody just learned by doing it. I took that 6-page memo and I annotated it. And I explain in there what Walt Disney understood about acting in 1935 and what he did not understand, because there were some things he did not understand. Yeah. Because there was very little literature. At that time, Konstantin Stanislavski's books had not been yet translated into English. They had not been published in English. So Walt Disney was making this up. He was looking at live action movies and trying to figure it out, and then trying to apply it to animation. And he got it amazingly well. He was really very perceptive, but he had some wrong ideas. Like, for example, he would talk about a fat guy trying to get in and out of a car, and he would talk about how that was funny, the fat guy, because he's fat. But in fact, that's not really the fact that he's fat is not really what's funny. It's not that his body is so funny. Yeah. It's there's other reasons, much more involved reasons for why that's funny. And so what I do in this section of the Acting for Animators is I explain why that type of a thing. I explain what it was he didn't know, what it was he did know. Yeah. And sometimes when he said some things that were just wrong, and I explain why, but it made sense at the time. So that's one of the things that's in the book. Also, I have 5 or 6 movies that I've deconstructed scene by scene for acting analysis. I've gone through I don't have the DVDs for them in there, but I have the movies with the time codes. So if you have the DVD, which you can get, most of them are very available, then you can follow along with my notes, watch the movie, and then just look at the book, and we will analyze the scenes together from an acting perspective, and I'll tell you which ones are working and why, and if there's a scene that needs to have particular attention, I'll point that out to you. I'll suggest, rewind that and look at that scene a second time, but look at it from this character's perspective now. These are the types of things. So it's a very good revision of the book. It's the revised 4th edition of Acting for Animators. And also, I have another book that has just been published, another title called Craft Notes for Animators, A Perspective on a 21st Century Career. It's in 3 sections. The premise of the book is that today's animator would be well advised to go back and study Walt Disney, not for the production. That there's plenty of information about the production, but of Snow White and all of these, but to go back and study Walt Disney's psychology, if you will. Why did he pick this material to make a movie out of? And given that he picked the material, why did he make the changes that he did? The idea is that the changes that you see in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs reflected Walt Disney's personal values, his personal philosophy, his view of women, his view of heroism, his view of wealth, his view of God is all right there in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And he signed that movie. Think about this. What would you sign? It's not just Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And so in this book that I wrote, I point this out, that he intended this book to reflect his values. He stood by what it had to say. And I think that today, somehow this is being lost. It's being compromised. Will animators today, would they sign their work? Would they sign everything they do? Does your work reflect your values? What are your values? So this book is written in 3 sections. The first section is a deconstruction of Walt Disney's values. The second section is an overview of the animation industry internationally today. And the third section is a manifesto in which I encourage the animator today to re-examine Walt Disney. Don't be looking at the Disney company, Disney Studio. Look at Walt Disney himself. Because I believe if Walt Disney came back today, probably the Walt Disney Company would not even hire him, you see, because they have now an assembly line for what they do. And Walt Disney was a visionary, and it was his values. He wore them on his sleeve.
So inspiring stuff. And these are exactly the things where I say that you opened my eyes, because your talks and your books, they come with this encouragement to develop your personal influence, your personal voice, and take a responsibility. I think that's very important. Another thing that I found very interesting, I saw on your Facebook recently that you moved from the US to Europe. How did that happen? Why the big move?
This is a personal story, but my wife and I decided to move from Los Angeles, and there was two reasons. One is that we were looking for another great adventure in our lives. We've been married a long time, and we're in good health, and we're curious, and we like the world. But another reason, more to the point, was that I perceive that the animation industry is changing. It's becoming less Hollywood-centric. That if you think about it, the Disney company and Comcast Universal, those two companies now own something close to 90% of feature animation in the United States. Those two companies. And neither of them are really in the movie business. Both of them run theme parks and merchandising, and the movies that they make are really feature-length commercials for their products. Okay? This has never appealed to me. This has always been a problem for me personally, because I think of animation as an art form. And I think it's the most underappreciated and underused art form of the 21st century. At this moment, there are over 40 feature animated films in production in Europe. And there's another 30 that are in pre-production right now.
Yeah.
The average budget is about 10 million euro.
Yeah, which is nothing compared to...
Which is nothing. Disney will spend $200 million. Okay? And they'll announce release dates 3-4 years in advance. They'll have release dates for movies that don't exist yet. This is the way Hollywood works. It's just the way Hollywood works. Really, if you're going to make a movie, you should have a story to tell. Yeah. That should be where it starts. It shouldn't be that this is a huge merchandising machine. So my sense of things is that Europe, in particular, is poised to take the animation industry to the next level. I'm beginning to see more adult-themed animation. The platforms that people can see animation on is changing. So I don't know about you, but I bet 80% at least of the movies I watch at home now on my computer. I stream them, Amazon, iTunes, whatever. I buy DVDs. I put them on. You have a nice television, a big screen. It's quite a nice experience. It's fine. Yeah. And going to the movie has become an expensive evening. For a date. I mean, by the time you go and park the car and pay for 2 adults, maybe you have a baby, you've got a babysitter, you've now got, you're going to stop and have a hamburger or a pizza. But the first thing you know, you're talking €100 to go out for the evening to see a movie. It's just not like it used to be where you could say, hey, let's go grab a flick. You know, it's become a deal. So the nature of the industry is changing. And my perception is that what's happening in Europe more closely fits my personal values. I wanted to be closer to this. I wanted to be closer to what I see as the most exciting cutting edge of animation. I want to work with people who are telling stories. And as you know, I teach that animators, like actors, are shamans. And I really believe that the tribes depend on the shamans for how to survive in the world. I don't mean to be overly dramatic about this. I really don't. But I believe that the tribes of the world right now are in a great deal of trouble. They're floundering. They're fighting with each other in ways I've never seen. I'm 72 years old, And the United States has been at war for 50 years. 50 years of my life, often more than one at a time. This is wrong. It's just wrong. And I say, where are the shamans? Why have we got people being kicked out of countries? And why is this happening? People are having trouble surviving. And I think that the tribes need to hear from shamans. And I perceive that there are shamans in this part of the world. I perceive that in the United States, what they're doing is they're selling stuff to the tribe. They're not helping, at least in the world of animation. It's more exciting with independent live action film than animation. But anyway, that all of this, I tell you this thing at the risk of sounding really crazy. I understand. But honestly, this was on my mind when we made the move. And I'm very glad we did. We're enjoying Lisbon, Portugal, and it's now easier for me to get to places like here, like Stuttgart, and to talk with you. It's just much better altogether for us as a couple. It's better for me, I think, and I think it was the right move. But it was a big move, because it was very much like stepping into the Star Trek transporter. I mean, we had to reduce our lives, my wife and I, we had to reduce our lives to 28 boxes. And the boxes are right now in a boat. I still don't have them. Oh, God. It's been 3 months and I still don't have those boxes. We'll have them this month. But an international move like this is like you vaporize your entire self in one country and then reformulate in another. Wow. Yeah. It's a great adventure. And I'm taking notes. I hope to actually write something about this as time goes by, because I've found it a great life adventure. I believe that.
I find this very interesting because when I started the Film Academy, as a young animation student, you're always like, one day I want to work for Disney, for Pixar. Like, this is like, you start studying, and I think many people start studying animation with the goal to become an animator at these big companies. Right. And only through studying, I realized that there's much more. And that it doesn't all evolve around Hollywood.
That's just growing up. And you're fortunate. And there's nothing wrong with going to work for Disney or Pixar. It pays pretty good. You get a nice desk, and it's. I think it's fine if people want to do that and they're happy to do it. I just think that there's much more, and that your career arc does not have to go there. Especially now, there's many things that are changing because of the way the production models where they're picking up animators and funding from 8, 9, 10 different countries and putting it together, and you're creating virtual animation studios where everybody is working over the internet. I mean, movies like Chico and Rita and stuff. I mean, it's remarkable. Have you seen the movie A Boy and the World?
No.
Oh, well, you must. You must. You must. This is probably over the past couple of years, one of my very favorite feature animated films. It comes from Brazil, and it was traditional animation, 2D, and it cost $500,000 to make. 500,000. And it was made by 15 animators. The director's name is Ali Abreu. And the dialogue in the movie is they typed out Portuguese backwards.
Okay.
And then they recorded it that way. So the dialogue sounds like gibberish. There's a lot of music. The animation style is crude almost. The lead character is a 7-year-old boy, and he is a circle for a head and 3 hairs on top of his head and 2 slashes for eyes. But with the use of blinking, Ali Abreu makes it so that you can follow this kid's thoughts the whole time. So the basic story is that this 7-year-old boy who's been raised on a farm leaves home and goes in search of his father, who is an itinerant worker. And the boy has never seen the world at all because he's only 7. And so he sees the world that we adults have created. And some of it he doesn't relate, some of it he doesn't know what it is. And some of it he does. Some of it's very disturbing. So ultimately he does find his father, but not in the way that you think. And I will leave that hanging.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, it's, for my opinion, the movie should have won the Academy Award. And I think it's extremely innovative. And I do recommend it. Yeah, boy, in the world. It's an indication of what people can do. You can raise $500,000 US off of Kickstarter, you see. I mean, everything is possible right now.
Yeah.
That's the point. Everything is possible.
Yeah. If I look from my personal perspective, like on the one hand side, you want to do just what you want to do, just your opinion, just your ideas. On the other hand side, you want that people like it and probably also that people buy it because you know you need to make money. And like, I mean, I'm fairly at the beginning of my career too, so I'm always like I'm still shying away from being like, this is my voice, I want to do it like this. Also, I think in the fear of that it won't succeed, you know, that I make a Kickstarter and nobody gives me money. Yeah, so what do you think?
Well, about what? Being at the beginning of your career?
This whole dilemma of how do you start that?
Well, find other people that you want to work with.
Yeah.
I believe that that's the key. If you find other people, you'll spark each other. And I mean, it isn't that everybody needs to make independent movies, but there's projects that are existing that are out there. Find the people. It's about relationships. Good people work with good people. Okay? And I'm a great advocate in this. If I don't know which animators you admire, what directors you admire, but study their work and then contact them and tell them, stick your hand out and say, this is who I am and I would like to work with you because you do this kind of work. I want to work with you. And you will launch yourself in no time. That's the way this works. I believe that.
Thank you so much, Ed Hooks. Let's keep doing this every year.
I would like it.
So wonderful. Thank you very much.
Bravo.